We discussed about the ancient period, the medieval period, the modern period. We discussed about how the world had evolved in the ancient period, right? We spoke about the ancient Greek political thought, which evolved under distinct conditions in ancient Greece, characterized by a very important political institution called polis, P-O-L-I-S. These were city-states in ancient Greek civilization. The entire Greek political thought was centered around this institution called polis. The polis, it occupied the center stage as far as their thinking was concerned. So everything that they contemplated was within this city-state. Okay? They spoke about authority, they spoke about obedience, they spoke about laws, they spoke about an ideal state, they spoke about eradication of evils in a democratic system. All these things were pondered upon by the ancient Greeks. When we came down to the medieval period, we discussed that in the entire medieval period, there was no development in art, literature, architecture and so forth, primarily because of the two stifling influences on humans, which was religion as well as the political authority. Okay? One was controlling thought, the other was controlling actions. Slowly, after several centuries of this religious orthodoxy and obscurantism and exploitation and feudalism, okay, the world entered its modern phase. And I told you that the modern age was called as the age of reason. So men began to exercise reason and men began to question. Men began to adopt scientific temper. Men began to observe the reality. And they realized that knowledge is not to be based on religious texts. Knowledge should have a very strong footing in science, okay, and in scientific principles. It was from here onwards that society began to embark on a new path. Here, in the modern times, we saw the growth of a new ideology which was called as liberalism. We discussed that in the last class, isn't it? Liberalism is an ideology which preached individual liberty and freedom. Okay? It believed in the idea that individuals left to themselves are capable of taking care of their needs, isn't it? Are you all not capable of taking care of your needs? You are capable, isn't it? We're all reasonable, we're all rational, we're all capable of taking our needs. మనకి ఏం కావాలో మనకి తెలుసు కదా మీకేం కావాలో మీ లైఫ్లో తెలుసా? నాకు ఇంకా తెలియలేదండి, మీకైతే తెలిసిపోయింది కదా. గుడ్ ఫర్ యూ. ఓకే, సో individuals are capable of taking their decisions. What we require to give them is freedom. Ante. Give them freedom. Give them freedom to choose their faith. I told you, liberalism was an ideology which had three dimensions. It had a social dimension, political and economic. Socially, we discussed in the last class, this ideology called liberalism stood for a secular order. It promoted the idea that individuals should be free to choose their faith. Individuals should be free to choose their religion and their belief systems, whether to believe in God or not. Do we have a fundamental right in India not to believe in God? We have a right to religion, but do we have a right not to believe in religion and God? That's the question. Don't have, you sure? The Saifuddin versus the state of Bombay case, Supreme Court declared that right to religion in India includes right not to believe in any religion or God. Atheism by itself constitutes a religion under Indian Constitution, according to the Supreme Court. Okay? Anyway, this was the modern idea. Secularism also is a modern idea. Okay? It believed that religion should be left to individual's choice. Individuals should be free, whether to love God or whether to be devoted to God or whether to fight with God. That should be individual choice. What is the kind of relationship that we want to establish with God should be our individual preference and choice. That's secularism. Okay? So liberalism socially stood for a secular order. It promoted the idea that religion should not intervene in social, personal or political life. It has its own place. Let it be an individual choice. Let society not be guided by religious principles and obscurantism and dogmatism. Okay? Let religious principles not influence the policies and laws or judgments of the state. Okay? State is concerned about the relationship between man and man. And religion is about relationship between man and God. Both are two different spheres. Okay? You understand secularism, right? Okay? Can you tell me what is the meaning of the word secular? He is a secular person antar kada. What does it mean? Any idea? Who? Yeah, of course. who is able to make a distinction between this world and that world. You know? Right? This is secular world and that is the spiritual world. If a person is not allowing religion to influence his decisions, his thoughts, his opinions or his judgments, then we call that person as a secular person. You don't allow religion and religious principles to influence your decisions and judgments. వాడు ఆ రిలీజన్ కాబట్టి ఇట్లా ఉంటాడు అని అనుకోకూడదు. ఓకే, యూ షుడ్ నాట్ అలవ్ రిలీజన్ అండ్ రిలీజియస్ ప్రిన్సిపల్స్ టు క్లౌడ్ యువర్ జడ్జ్మెంట్స్. దెన్ యూ బికమ్ ఏ సెక్యులర్ పర్సన్. అట్లాగే ఒక సెక్యులర్ సొసైటీ కూడా. ఓకే, a society which recognizes the principle that religion is an individual choice. Okay, right. Uniform civil code, is it a secular matter or a religious matter? It should be considered as a secular matter. It should be considered as something which has got nothing to do with religion. Okay, so must have heard about this controversy related to uniform civil code and all that stuff. Recently Narendra Modi also had hinted at uniform civil code. We'll come to that later when we discuss Indian polity. Okay, however, liberalism upheld this idea that society should be based on secular principles and not religious principles. Religion should not be the guiding factor to organize society. Okay, society should be based and organized on secular principles, principles which are related to this world. Okay, next, politically we discuss that liberalism stands for a democratic order. It promotes the idea of democracy, where individuals shall be free to choose their government. Individuals shall be free to exercise political rights, where individuals shall be free to choose their leaders and choose agendas. Then that's the idea behind democracy, isn't it? What is democracy? A form of government in which dictatorship is the opposite of democracy. How do you distinguish between democracy and dictatorship? What's the difference?
What is the difference between monarchy and dictatorship?
Monarchy is ruled by a hereditary king. Okay, the opposite of monarchy is republic, which is a state having an elected head. Okay, this is a republic. Monarchy is ruled by a hereditary head. Got it? England is a monarchy because the English queen or king occupies that office as a matter of hereditary right. Got it, sir? Okay, so monarchy is the opposite of republic. So tell me, what is the difference or distinction between democracy and dictatorship? The opposite of democracy is dictatorship, obviously. How do they both differ from each other? Things will get clearer now. Okay, England is a monarchy. Is it a democracy or not? Yes, England is a constitutional democracy where the constitution recognizes monarch as the head. Okay, so democracy can go hand in hand with monarchy. Got it? So we are a democratic republic, they are a democratic monarchy. Got it? Okay, so how does democracy differ from its opposite variant called dictatorship? How? Now you know that the governments can be classified into democracies and dictatorships based on people's participation in public decisions. So based on people's participation in public decisions, we categorize governments into democracy and dictatorship. I think I told you yesterday, if majority of people's opinion forms the basis for all public decisions, we call that as democracy. Majority people's opinion forms the basis for all public decisions. Conversely, if a minority takes all public decisions, we call that as dictatorship. If it is a single person minority who takes all the decisions, we call that as autocracy. A single person dictatorship is called as autocracy. A single man dictating terms, taking all decisions. It's a minority, right? That's a dictatorship. If a minority social group captures powers and takes all public decisions, we call that as oligarchy. Okay, if a small group of military leaders have captured power, okay, and have imposed themselves on society, and have taken decisions. We call that as military dictatorship. That's a dictatorship, but that is called as military dictatorship. Example, Myanmar. Recently, at Bangladesh, okay, right? The system is still not entrenched as yet in Bangladesh, but Myanmar is an established military dictatorship. Okay, if there is a single political party comprising of a minority leaders of the party who have banished all other political parties and who have established their own dictatorship, that is called as party dictatorship. They don't allow any counter ideology. They don't allow any opposing political parties and agendas or programs. Okay, this is also a type of dictatorship, and that is called as party dictatorship. Example, party dictatorship. One political party captured power, banishes all other political parties and ideologies, and takes decisions. China, North Korea. Okay, all these are party dictatorships. All of them are dictatorships. Adolf Hitler established an autocracy in Germany. That's a single person dictatorship. We have a series of minority social groups like the ethnic groups who have captured power in Africa and have established dictatorships. Okay, like Rwanda. Have you heard that? Okay, ivanni kuda dictatorships anandi. Right? All these are different variants of dictatorship. Conversely, if majority opinion forms the basis for all public decisions, we call that as democracy. There is one more thing about political science, okay, which I'd like to draw your attention to. That is the fact that, remember, we will study Western political thought as the first part of our syllabus. Okay, as soon as we finish off with Western political thought, the next topic we'll be discussing is ideologies. Okay, so when you take up every subsequent new chapter, around 30 to 35% of what you study in the new chapter will be those things which you have already covered in your previous lectures. Okay, I told you, right, the subject goes in a flow. So with every chapter that we study, 35 to 40% sometimes is what you might have already learnt in the previous classes. Okay, so ideologies chusna, ideologies you look at liberalism, Marxism, socialism, and again you look at state. In state, you also study again liberal theory of state, Marxist theory of state, again same things. Okay, then you look at approaches to political science. There also you look at Marxist approach to political science, liberal approaches to political science. Kabatti, what you study in the earlier classes, they will be again repeated in the later classes also. You will see that. Okay, so students in political science, keep telling to me, sir, ఇది already మనం నేర్చుకున్నాం కదా ఇంతకు ముందు అని. ఓకే, సో సబ్జెక్ట్లో ఆ ఫ్లో ఉంటుందండి ఎప్పుడు కూడా. ఓకే, సో ట్రై నాట్ టు మిస్ క్లాసెస్. ఓకే, ట్రై టు క్యాచ్ అప్. ఇవన్నీ ఉన్నాయి కదా, రికార్డింగ్ క్లాసెస్ అవి ఉంటాయి కదా. సో ట్రై టు క్యాచ్ అప్ విత్ క్లాసెస్ వెన్ ఎవర్ యూ మిస్ దెమ్. ఓకే, సో దిస్ ఈస్ వాట్స్ కాల్డ్ యాజ్ డెమోక్రసీ. సో పీపుల్ హియర్ హ్యావ్ నౌ claimed their power to choose agendas, to choose their leaders, okay, choose their governments, right? This is democracy. Now you tell me, whether you discussed about democracy, do you think that we are living in a democracy? Majority people's opinion forms the basis for all public decisions. Do you think that the governments who take these decisions today are taking them based on majority people's approval and opinion? What do you think? Is India a democracy or not? Yes or no? Yes, democracy. You think the governments are taking decisions based on majority's acceptance and approval? Somewhat. Okay. Not truly. Mostly? Or they take decisions arbitrarily based on their own whims and fancies. They don't care for majority opinion. Ante antara? So we are not living in democracy. Okay. Let's see. Have you voted in this election, sir? మన ఎలక్షన్స్లో ఓటేసారా? ఓ, ఇంకా ఏజ్ రాలేదా? అచ్చా, ఎలక్షన్ కార్డ్ రాలేదా? ఓకే. మీరు సార్, మీరేసారా? మీరు కూడా వెళ్ళలేదా? యూ ఆల్ బ్యాడ్లీ నీడ్ పొలిటికల్ సైన్స్, ఐ గెస్. ఓకే, హ్యావ్ యూ? యూ ఆల్సో హ్యావ్ voted. Have you looked at the candidate to whom you have voted? What did you see when you have voted in the elections? Have you looked at the candidate and his qualities? What did you look for when you had voted in these elections? Tell me. Honestly, డబ్బులు తీసుకున్నారా? ఎట్లా వేసారు ఓటు? మీరు వేశారు సార్ ఓటు? ఏం చూసి ఓటేశారు సార్? రూలింగ్ పార్టీ వాళ్ళు కొంచెం మంచి పనులు చేశారు కాబట్టి మీకు నచ్చి. అపోజిషన్ పార్టీ, సో రూలింగ్ పార్టీ మీద కడుపు మంటతో అపోజిషన్ పార్టీకి వేసానంటారు. ఓకే, ఫెయిర్ ఇనఫ్. మీరు ఏం చూసి ఓటేశారు? ఏం చూడకుండానే ఓటేశారు సార్. ఏదో పని. సో ideally, what should you look at before you vote in the elections?
What are they going to provide? What are the
Agenda.
yes.
Every political party will propose an agenda before the elections. They will put forward their program. Okay? సో మా పార్టీకి ఓటేస్తే తెలంగాణలో బంగారు తెలంగాణను ఏర్పాటు చేస్తామని కేసీఆర్ గారు, స్వర్ణాంధ్రప్రదేశ్ని ఏర్పాటు చేస్తామని ఇక్కడ ఇంకొక నాయకుడు, ఇట్లా. ఓకే, ఎవ్రీబడి విల్ కమ్ అవుట్ విత్ దేర్ ఓన్ ఎజెండా. దిస్ ఈస్ కాల్డ్ యాజ్ మేనిఫెస్టో, isn't it? Okay, ideally in a democracy the people are supposed to look at the agenda and vote for the agenda which fulfills their aspirations. Followed me, right? The party whose agenda was supported by the majority of people after forming the government will make this their policy. Okay, this is how the majority of decisions taken by the government are approved by people. This is how we are operationalizing our democracy. Okay, problem ekkada vastundi ante majority of people are not looking at agendas, isn't it? Okay, that's where the problem lies. Now, I'd been to the interview in 2007 and I was asked a question in the interview. Okay, the board asked me, Mr. Goutham, you're from political science? Yes, yes sir. So, you did your research in political science? I said, yes sir. Then they asked me, India has a series of political problems. A plethora of political problems are there in India. Okay, can you give us a panacea for all the political problems? Panacea అంటే మనకు అర్థం కాదు. ఫేస్ చూసి వెంటనే బోడికి అర్థమయ్యి పెనీషియా మీన్స్ ఏ క్యూర్ ఫర్ ఆల్ ఇల్స్ అని చెప్పారండి. చెప్పి దెన్ దే ఆస్క్డ్ మీ, కెన్ యూ సజెస్ట్ ఏ క్యూర్ ఫర్ ఆల్ పొలిటికల్ ఇల్స్ దట్ దిస్ కంట్రీ ఈజ్ అఫ్లిక్టెడ్ విత్? అండ్ దే సెడ్, మిస్టర్ గౌతమ్, we are in no hurry. You please take your time. Think for as much time as you want. But give us a good answer as a student of political science అని చెప్పి అన్నారు. Okay? But you know what happens? In an interview like this, whatever strikes you first in the mind, you know, that lingers, no matter how much time they give you. ఫస్ట్ ఏది స్ట్రైక్ అవుతుందో అదే లాస్ట్ దాకా ఉంటుందండి. ఓకే, సో నాకు ఒకటి స్ట్రైక్ అయింది స్టార్టింగ్లో, అదే చెప్పాను వాళ్ళకి. మళ్ళీ అడిగారు, మళ్ళీ అదే చెప్పాను. ఇంకా వేరేది ఏది స్ట్రైక్ కావట్లేదు సార్ నాకు అని చెప్పాను. ఓకే, సో a lot of problems are there, but this is how we have operationalized our democracy. So if tomorrow somebody asks you, is India a democracy? Say yes. We have our problems, we have our flaws, but still we are a democracy because the policies and decisions taken by the government are based on people's approval, who give their mandate and opinion through their vote in the elections. This is how we have operationalized our democracy. This is the idea for which the ideology called liberalism stands for. Liberalism stood for democracy. Liberalism stood for all those things which democracy proposes, like political rights, like freedom of speech and expression, like rule of law. All those things which democracy requires were upheld by the liberal ideology. Okay, so this was the political dimension of liberalism. Socially, liberalism upheld secular order. Politically, liberalism upheld a democratic model of governance. Okay, on the economic side, you remember yesterday we discussed that liberalism stood for an economic system called capitalism, isn't it? Capitalism, which says that production, individuals should be free. Actually, liberalism stands for freedom, isn't it? Liberty. Individuals should be free to participate in economic process. without being subject to any form of controls by the government. Okay? The state should not interfere in economic activities of individuals, in economic decisions of individuals. So individuals should be free to participate in economic process and take economic decisions. Okay? Today I had a very grueling day in terms of too many classes today. Okay? So we have this group 1 mains in the offing, isn't it? I teach polity and governance for main students, and that's the reason why 5-6 days koncham. Okay, so individuals should be free to participate in economic process and take economic decisions without being hindered by the state. Okay, it also stands for right of individuals to own, acquire, possess and dispose property. Right of ownership. Individuals and organizations right to own, possess, enjoy and dispose property. Okay. Third, capitalism also stands for private ownership of means of production. Private ownership of means of production. You know what are means of production? All those things which we require to produce goods or services of value are called as means of production. What are the things we require? Economy. Things we require to produce. We require ఏదైనా ప్రొడ్యూస్ చేయాలంటే ఏం కావాలి మనకి? ఎలక్ట్రిసిటీ కావాలి. Okay. There are 4 factors of production. 4. Okay. Land, labor, capital, organization. These are called as the factors of production. ఓకే, మీరు ఎలక్ట్రిసిటీ ఇవన్నీ కూడా క్యాపిటల్ పెడితే వచ్చేస్తాయండి. ఓకే, క్యాపిటల్ అంటే పెట్టుబడి. ఓకే, దీస్ ఆర్ ద 4 factors of production. They are in political sense they are called as means of production. In economy they are called as factors of production. Okay, you learn that as a part of your economy in general studies. Okay, so they are called as factors of production. Land, labor, capital and organization. Capitalism stands for private ownership of these means of production. Land will be held in private hands. Capital will be held in private hands. Okay, organization ante companies andi. For example, this is an organization kada. Okay, this is under private ownership of somebody, isn't it? So this is capitalism. They're all capitalists, my dear friends. Okay, all of them are capitalists. They hire labor. Okay, right? They own property, they own capital, they own organizations, they own labor. Okay, all of them are in private ownership. This is called as capitalism. Capitalism believes in market principle. It means, we discussed yesterday, all the economic decisions should be taken by the invisible forces of market called demand and supply. State should not interfere. ఒక గూడికి ఎంత ప్రైస్ ఉండాలి అనేది ఆ గూడికి మార్కెట్లో ఉన్నటువంటి డిమాండ్ బట్టి డిసైడ్ అవ్వాలి, అంతే. ఓకే, ఇవాళ సివిల్ సర్వీసెస్ కోచింగ్కి ఎంత డిమాండ్ ఉంది అనే దాన్ని బట్టి సివిల్ సర్వీసెస్ కోచింగ్ ప్రైస్ డిటర్మైన్ అవుతుంది అనమాట, అంతే కదా. ఓకే, సో ఒకవేళ సివిల్ సర్వీసెస్ కోచింగ్కి డిమాండ్ ఉందనుకోండి, ఈ ఆర్గనైజేషన్స్ని కూడా ఈ కోచింగ్ని సప్లై చేస్తాయి. సో డెసిషన్స్ రిలేటెడ్ టు ఎకనామిక్ యాక్టివిటీస్ షుడ్ బి guided by the invisible forces of market called demand and supply, and state should not interfere in these market forces. Okay, can you tell me who was the person who proposed this idea that economic activity should be guided by the invisible forces of market called demand and supply, and state should not interfere? He was father of economics. He wrote a book called Wealth of Nations. No idea, ఇంకా ఇక్కడ స్ట్రైక్ కావట్లేదా? His name is Adam Smith. పేరున్నారా? యా, మస్ట్ హావ్ హర్డ్ సమ్వేర్. ఎక్కడో తవ్వకాల్లో అవన్నీ బయటకు వస్తాయని మెల్లిగా చిన్నప్పుడు చదివినవన్నీ కూడా కదా. Adam Smith. Okay, all of them proposed capitalism అండి. They upheld capitalism. Okay, so all the economic decisions should be taken by the invisible forces of market called demand and supply. State should play a minimum role. State plays a minimum role. Okay, so individual should be free. Individual should exercise rights to own property, to take decisions. Okay, state should play a minimum role. State should not interfere or intervene in economic activities or market. All the economic decisions should be guided by the invisible forces of market called demand and supply. Means of production, all the things that we require to produce will be held under private ownership and private management. The state will not own these means of production. Simple. Okay, this is capitalism. So we're all free, right? Economy will be liberal. Have you heard about new economic policy that India had adopted in 1991? Have you heard about that? Liberalization, privatization, globalization, LPG. Liberal economy. It means economy will not have any controls, any restrictions. Okay? So this very broadly was capitalism, my dear friends. Capitalism was almost like a boon to humanity. For the first time, we had seen unprecedented growth in economies in the Western countries. Okay? Scientific discoveries, cutting-edge technologies, inventions and breakthroughs all took place in a matter of a few hundred years. Suddenly somebody discovers electricity. Suddenly somebody discovers immunization. Okay? The Western world began to throb with all economic activities and prosperity. People's choices increased. Okay? Capitalism, as I told you, was a boon for humanity. It gave humanity unprecedented growth, and it rid men of all those shackles. Men could break free from all those medieval shackles imposed by monarchy and religion and blind beliefs and dogmas. Okay? Guided by principles of science, logical, positivist, young, dynamic societies have taken their birth in the Western countries. Modern age had come. The age of materialism. Okay? If there is something, it is in this world. There is nothing in that world. We don't know whether there is that world or not. Okay? People began to value material. People began to value economic prosperity. Okay? So this was the new world, new modern age, the age of reason. Okay? I told you, if you remember yesterday, that mankind witnessed Renaissance. Mankind began to reform their thought, their social and political institutions. Men began to reform their literature, their outlooks and perspectives. Men began to adopt science as the guiding principle. Okay? Men gave up everything that was based on blind belief. Okay? The modern age had come. Capitalism, liberalism, secularism, humanism, these things began to dominate human thought. Okay? Man is at the center of everything. There is no God, nothing. Man is at the center of everything, humanism. Okay? Let us first look at the man. Let us try to give him a good life. Let us try to provide him with better material conditions. Let us treat everybody equal. Let us give them rights. This is a part of human dignity. This was called liberal ideology. This was the most dominant ideology, and principles related to democracy, capitalism, they began to be accepted across the entire world. And you know that because of capitalism, the Western world began to experience a new form of revolution called industrial revolution. So Renaissance, Reformation, the birth of liberal ideology, all these led to industrial revolution in the Western world. I told you, right? Unprecedented growth. Large, mega industries had taken their birth in Western countries. Huge assembly lines were created. Large-scale production of goods and services had taken place. People had immense choices now. Okay? Standards of life were increasing. Antibiotics were found out. Immunization was found out. Living standards and longevity began to increase. Everything was fine. Okay? But for this industrial revolution in the Western countries to sustain, it requires continuous supply of raw materials. And it requires markets for their finished products, isn't it? దే రిక్వైర్ మార్కెట్స్ కదా, ప్రొడ్యూస్ చేయడం ఒకటే కాదు కదా, దే రిక్వైర్ మార్కెట్స్ ఆల్సో. వై ఇస్ చైనా ద లార్జెస్ట్ ఎకానమీ ఇన్ ద వరల్డ్ టుడే? It has a very, very strong manufacturing base. More importantly, China had converted the entire world into its market. ఏ కంట్రీలో వాళ్ళకి ఏం కావాలో ఫస్ట్ స్టడీ చేసేసి వాళ్ళకి ఏం కావాలో ఏ సీజన్లో కావాలో సప్లై చేసేస్తున్నారు. ఓకే, చైనా. మనకి హోలీ వచ్చిందనుకోండి, కలర్స్ చైనా నుంచి వస్తున్నాయి, తెలుసా మీకు? సంక్రాంతి వచ్చిందనుకోండి, చైనా నుంచి మాంజా వస్తుంది, పతంగులు వస్తున్నాయి. దివాళీకి చైనా నుంచి క్రాకర్స్ వస్తున్నాయి. గణేష్ ఉత్సవ్కి గణేష్ మూర్తిస్ కూడా చైనా నుంచి ఇండియాకి ఇంపోర్ట్ చేస్తున్నారు. చూడండి, దే హావ్ క్రియేటెడ్ ద వరల్డ్స్ లార్జెస్ట్ మ్యానుఫ్యాక్చరింగ్ బేస్, చైనా. ఓకే, దీస్ companies in the Western countries require supply of raw materials and they require markets. So the Western world began to radiate outside, began to explore for territories. That led to the finding out of new sea routes. Okay, so new territories were discovered. I told you, that's the reason why Christopher Columbus set sail across the Atlantic Ocean to find out if there was land. Suddenly, somebody finds a new sea route across the Cape of Good Hope and discovers India. Who was the person? Vasco da Gama discovers the sea route to India in 1498. మొత్తం ప్రపంచంలో ఉన్నటువంటి అన్ని ప్రాంతాలని మెల్లిగా దే బిగాన్ టు ఎక్స్ప్లోర్. సో వీ హ్యాడ్ సీన్ massive geographic discoveries, both in the western, the eastern, far east, everywhere. Okay, and wherever new territories were found, slowly these western countries began to establish their trade relations. Okay, so a lot of these western countries, the Portuguese, Dutch, Spanish, English, French, Russians, Austrians, they began to engage in trade with the rest of the world because they had to sustain their industrial revolution. Please remember, England was the epicenter of this industrial revolution. Huge industrial centers were created at places like Lancashire, Manchester. At various places, huge industrial centers were created. Okay, and slowly all these countries began to radiate outside and they began to spread themselves and began to carve out spheres of dominance and influence. That led to what was called as colonization. Have you heard that? A handful of countries based in Europe began to colonize the entire world. The entire North America was colonized. The entire South American continent was colonized. The entire Middle East, the entire African continent, the entire South Asia, Southeast Asia, Far East. చిన్న చిన్న ఐలాండ్. హ్యావ్ యూ హర్డ్ an island called Fiji? అసలు గ్లోబ్లో భూతద్దం పెట్టుకుని ఎతకాలి దానికోసం, రైట్? దాన్ని కూడా వదిలిపెట్టలేదు అనమాట. దే స్ప్రెడ్ అక్రాస్ ద ఎంటైర్ వరల్డ్, కాలనైజింగ్ ద ఎంటైర్ వరల్డ్. This led to massive outflux of Europeans to colonize the entire world. They began to engage in imperialism, territorial aggrandizement, and economic expansion. Okay, unfortunately, India also became a colony of England. Now, capitalism, which was a very progressive ideology, which emerged like a boon to mankind, began to show its ugly side, began to show its darker side rather. Capitalism now was showing all its drawbacks, deficiencies. It began to create inequalities. It led to exploitation of man. Okay, these big industrialists began to exploit hapless working classes. It led to territorial expansion and colonization, subjugation of territories and exploitation of these territories for sustaining their industrial revolution. Shashi Tharoor gave a statement recently in Oxford saying that the industrial revolution, the wheels of industrial revolution in Europe turned on exploitation of India. Those were the wheels of industrial revolution. They were crushing us, sucking out our vitals, sustaining their industrial revolution. This was the kind of exploitation that countries began to face. Okay? Slowly, as capitalism began to show all its darker sides, a counter ideology began to take its birth. Okay? Capitalism was leading to inequalities. Capitalism was leading to exploitation. Capitalism was leading to imperialism and warfares. Greedy race for acquisition of colonies. Okay? It was at this time that a new ideology began to slowly shine across the horizon, and that was called socialism. Have you heard that? Okay? Socialism. This ideology began to become very popular. What capitalism says? Every individual is capable. Every individual requires only freedom. Give him that freedom. Within a framework of basic rules and regulations, allow individual to exercise maximum freedom. If he is capable, he will grow. If he is not capable, he will fall behind. Justice. అంతే కదా, ఎవరి దగ్గరైనా కేపబిలిటీ ఉందనుకోండి, కష్టపడే మనస్తత్వం ఉందనుకోండి, ఎదుగుతాడు. ఇఫ్ ఈజ్ లేజీ, ఇండోలెంట్ అండ్ ఇన్కేపబుల్, హీ విల్ ఫాల్ బిహైండ్. జస్టిసే కదా, రైట్? దిస్ ఈజ్ క్యాపిటలిజం. ఇట్ కమ్స్ అవుట్ విత్ ఎ ప్రిన్సిపల్ ఆఫ్ డిస్ట్రిబ్యూషన్ based on individuals' capabilities. You distribute based on your capabilities. If you are capable, if you are hardworking, if you are industrious, if you are determined, you will grow in life. Otherwise, you will fall behind. Simple. Eko complications live. Okay? Isn't this nice? You tell me. Is it the best way to organize society or not? Meekemanpistundi? Capitalism. Give individuals their freedom within, of course, a basic scheme of rules and regulations. Allow them to exercise the freedom and avail opportunities. Capable, you grow. Incapable, you fall behind. This is the best way to organize society. Is it or is it not? What is your take? What do you think? Is there any other way to organize society? A better society. This is what capitalism proposes. Are you all with me? Am I clear enough? The question is, do you think that this logic is sound? Yes. Okay. It seems so. But obviously, in operation, capitalism, I told you, initially had given the world unprecedented growth. Okay? But it created inequalities. It created unscrupulous accumulation of wealth by the capitalists. By whatever means, I have to grow rich. అనే ఒక మెంటాలిటీ, ఒక మైండ్ సెట్ వచ్చేసింది అనమాట. ఇప్పుడు కూడా చాలా మందికి కనిపిస్తుందండి, ఇవన్నీ వేస్ట్ బై, డబ్బులు సంపాదించుకోవాలి అనుకునే వాళ్ళు చాలామంది ఉన్నారు. ఇట్ ఓకే కదా? దెర్ ఆర్ లాట్ ఆఫ్ పీపుల్. ఐ హ్యాడ్ ఎ ఫ్రెండ్ హూ వాజ్ ఆల్సో ప్రిపేరింగ్ ఫర్ సివిల్ సర్వీసెస్. అరే మనకి ఐఏఎస్లో ఐపీఎస్లో వద్దామా, అనవసరంగా వేరే వాళ్ళు తలనొప్పులని మన నెత్తి మీదకి వస్తాయి. ఐఆర్ఎస్ కొట్టుకుంటే మంచిగా డబ్బులు సంపాదించుకోవచ్చు. ఐఆర్ఎస్ ఆర్ వన్ ఆఫ్ ద రిచెస్ట్ లాట్. మీకు తెలుసో తెలీదు, ఐఆర్ఎస్ ఆఫీసర్స్. ఓకే ఓకే, that was the kind of mindset, materialist mindset, was being bred by capitalism. Okay, so all these inadequacies in capitalism, as I told you, led to the rise of a new ideology called socialism. Okay, socialism became a new way of organizing society. He said, see, each living for himself. Capitalism, no, let each live for the society. Socialism. Okay, very simple. If capitalism emphasizes individual equality, liberty, socialism emphasizes creation of an egalitarian society, an equal society. Let no man have so much of wealth with him that he is able to control the lives of another. Okay, let no man accumulate so much of wealth that he is given an opportunity to control the lives of others. Okay, ఒకళ్ళ దగ్గర పెట్టుబడి ఉంది, ఒక పరిశ్రమ పెట్టాడు, ఒక 10 మందిని ఉద్యోగంలో పెట్టుకున్నాడు. వాడు ఉద్యోగం తీసేస్తే వీడికి జీవనోపాధి ఉండదు, కాబట్టి వాడిని కంట్రోల్ చేస్తాడు. ఓకే, అట్లా ఒకటి దగ్గర వేరే వ్యక్తి లైఫ్ని కంట్రోల్ చేసేంత శక్తి, సంపద ఉండకూడదు. సోషలిజం. ఓకే, దే బిలీవ్డ్ ఇన్ equal distribution of income and wealth. Socialists believed in the idea that the means of production should not be held in private hands. The means of production should be held commonly. This is called common ownership of means of production. So whatever you require to produce, let it be kept under common ownership. Okay? This was the idea of socialism. Very broadly, this was the idea. However, socialism and the ideology of socialism got a shot in the arm with the coming into the arena of the great Karl Marx. Have you heard his name? Karl Marx. Considered as a trio of the modern thought. There were three thinkers who had very, very strongly influenced modern thought. Three thinkers. Okay? Can you tell me modern thought, modern thinking, modern times? Aristotle, ancient Greek period, madam. Modern thought. Three people. I'll give you a hint. One person deciphered the biological evolution of man. Correct? Charles Darwin, who wrote a book called Origin of Species. అప్పటిదాకా రిలీజన్ ఏం చెప్తుంది? గాడ్ క్రియేటెడ్ యాడమ్ అండ్ ఫ్రమ్ యాడమ్స్ రిబ్ గాడ్ క్రియేటెడ్ ఈవ్. ఆల్ దిస్ ఇస్ నాట్ ట్రూ. మ్యాన్ ఇవాల్వ్డ్ ఫ్రమ్ apes. Biological evolution of man. That revolutionized the way people thought about religion. అవును కదా, నిజమేనేమో. అలా మెల్లిమెల్లిగా సల్ షేప్, నో షేప్ అన్నీ మారినాయేమో. Okay? And of course there is also an ample proof because some people show those traits still, isn't it? Okay, so we have evolved from monkeys. అనే ఒక idea, it revolutionized the modern thought. One. Second person who deciphered the psychological evolution of man, father of psychology, Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud was the person who deciphered how man had evolved. The earliest man ఎట్లా ఉన్నాడు, మన ప్రజెంట్ మ్యాన్ ఎట్లా ఉన్నాడు, ఈ మ్యాన్ ఎట్లా ఇవాల్వ్ అయ్యారు, థింకింగ్లో, సైకాలజీలో ఏ విధమైన మార్పులు వచ్చాయి. ఆర్ వి స్టిల్ ప్రిమిటివ్ ఇన్ అవర్ ప్రైమార్డియల్ లాయల్టీస్, ఇన్ అవర్ ఇన్స్టింక్ట్స్ అండ్ అర్జెస్ అనేది హీ డిసైఫర్డ్. అండ్ ఇగో ఏవో కాన్సెప్ట్స్ చెప్తారండి. ఓకే, హీ రివల్యూషనైజ్ ద వే పీపుల్ హ్యాడ్ థాట్ అబౌట్ హౌ వీ హ్యావ్ ఇవాల్వ్డ్ సైకలాజికల్లీ. ద థర్డ్, Karl Marx. He deciphered how man had evolved sociologically. Earliest man society ఎట్లా ఉండేది, మనం ఇవాళ ఏర్పాటు చేసుకున్న సొసైటీ ఎట్లా ఉంది, సోషలాజికల్గా ఎట్లా ఇవాల్వ్ అయ్యాం. ఓకే, వన్ డిసైఫర్డ్ biological evolution of man, the second one deciphered psychological evolution of man, and the third one deciphered the sociological evolution of man. We study about Karl Marx very soon. Okay, Karl Marx, very simple. Karl Marx says that capitalism is not the ideal way of production. Capitalism is an irrational mode of production. Why? Very simple. Tell me, what is the motive for production under capitalism? Excuse me? Why do they produce? Private sector lo production దేనికోసం చేస్తారు వాళ్ళు? దేనికోసం చేస్తారంటే ప్రాఫిట్స్. Capitalism is based on profit motive. The entire production takes place for the sake of profits. Okay? So profit motive is the engine for production in capitalism. I had done my post-graduation at Hyderabad Central University in political science. Okay? And I did my research there. And ఒక రోజు మార్క్సిజం గురించి చెప్పడానికి ఒక సార్ ఇద్దరు స్టూడెంట్స్ని బయటికి తీసుకెళ్ళి ఒక పెద్ద బోర్డు, ఇంత పెద్ద బోర్డు ఓకే మోస్ట్ని క్లాస్లోకి తీసుకొచ్చారు. ఆ బోర్డు నిండా రకరకాల అడ్వర్టైజ్మెంట్స్ అన్నీ అంటించాడు అనమాట. ఓకే, అన్ని అడ్వర్టైజ్మెంట్స్. సో ఈ అడ్వర్టైజ్మెంట్ చూసారా, ఈ అడ్వర్టైజ్మెంట్ చూసారా, ఈ అడ్వర్టైజ్మెంట్ చూసారా అని అన్ని అడ్వర్టైజ్మెంట్స్ మాకు చూపించాడు. చూపించి ఇవన్నీ మనకి పనికొస్తాయా? పనికిరావు. కానీ దే ఆర్ బీయింగ్ ప్రొడ్యూస్డ్. వై? బికాస్ దే ఈల్డ్ ప్రాఫిట్స్. లివ్ లైఫ్ కింగ్ సైజ్ సిగరెట్స్, వరల్డ్ ఫ్లాగ్ అడ్వర్టైజ్మెంట్ అది. ఓకే రైట్, లివ్ లైఫ్ కింగ్ సైజ్ అంటూ. మనకి పనికొస్తాయి సిగరెట్స్, పనికిరావు, బట్ దే ఈల్డ్ లాట్ ఆఫ్ ప్రాఫిట్స్. ద స్టేట్ exchequer gets its maximum contribution from liquor sales. తెలుసు కదా మీకు, రైట్? ఎక్సైజ్ డ్యూటీ ఆన్ లిక్కర్ contributes maximum to the state's exchequer, right? Under capitalism, according to Karl Marx, production takes place for the sake of profits, not to meet social needs. Resources are utilized for the capitalists to maximize their profits. అంతేకాని not to meet social needs కదా. Is this the right way to produce? This is an irrational mode of production, and therefore, according to Karl Marx, capitalism is an ideology which is born pregnant with the seeds of its own destruction. తన వినాశనానికి బీజాలు వేసుకుని పుట్టినటువంటి భావజాలం క్యాపిటలిజం. And that's why Karl Marx says that this ideology will not sustain. We should organize society based on another principle. And what is that principle? Take from each individual whatever he can give, and give to each individual whatever he needs. Chalu. From each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. That should be the basis on which we should organize production and distribution. Karl Marx, Marxism. This came with a huge impact on entire world. Yeah, this was called as communism or Marxism. It is just another variant of socialism అండి. ఓకే, సోషలిజంలోనే ఒక వేరియంట్ అనమాట మార్క్సిజం ఆర్ కమ్యూనిజం. ఓకే, కమ్యూనిజం టుక్ ద వరల్డ్ బై స్టామ్, రైట్? అండ్ ద ఎంటైర్ ఇంటెలిజెన్షియా అట్ దాట్ టైమ్ వాజ్ వెరీ స్ట్రాంగ్లీ ఇన్ఫ్లుయెన్స్డ్ బై మార్క్సిజం ఆర్ కమ్యూనిజం. ఓకే, దిస్ ఈస్ అ వెరీ వెరీ పవర్ఫుల్ ఐడియాలజీ. Theoretically, Marxism is very sound. That's the reason why a lot of people claim adherence to this communist ideology. ఒక్కసారి ఈ ఐడియాలజీకి ఇన్ఫ్లుయెన్స్ అయ్యామనుకోండి చాలా కష్టం అంట. అందుకని అంటారు చూసారా, అరగంట నెక్స్ట్ లైట్లో మాట్లాడితే మనం కూడా నెక్స్ట్ లైట్లో అయిపోతూ ఉంటాం. ఓకే, అంత స్ట్రాంగ్గా ఉంటుందంట వాళ్ళు మాట్లాడే మాటలు. ఓకే రైట్, ఐ కెన్ షో యూ సమ్ స్టూడెంట్స్. నేను వేరే చోట పొలిటికల్ సైన్స్ టీచ్ చేసినప్పుడు స్టూడెంట్స్ అందరూ దే ఫార్మ్ ఇంటి ఏ గ్రూప్, వాట్సాప్ గ్రూప్ అనమాట. ఓకే, దానిలో ఆ గ్రూప్ అది ఉంటుంది కదా, ఐకన్ ఇది అంటారు చూసారా, దానిలో కార్ల్ మార్క్స్ ఉంటాడు, లేకపోతే చెగువీరా ఉంటాడు, వాళ్ళ ఫొటోస్ ఉంటాయి అనమాట ఆ గ్రూప్ ఐకన్స్లో. ఎందుకంటే దే గెట్ సో అంత ఇమాజినేటివ్గా ఉంటుంది మార్క్సిజం. హూ కెన్ బిలీవ్ ద సన్స్ రే హ్యాస్ 7 colors in it? Who can believe 2 highly inflammable gases of hydrogen and oxygen combine to make water? All the universal truths are unbelievable, and so is Marxism under Karl Marx. Okay, he had been such a big influence that the entire academic circles began to come under the influence of Marxism. ఓకే, చాలామంది అప్పట్లో యూరోపియన్ కంట్రీస్లో చదువుకున్న మన లీడర్స్ కూడా, ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్, ఈజ్ దర్ ఎనీ సోషలిస్ట్ whom you know who had been a national leader for India? Yes, Jawaharlal Nehru was a socialist. Subhash Chandra Bose was a socialist. He established a political party called Forward Black, which was communist. M.N. Roy, the most prolific modern Indian political thinker, was a socialist. Okay, Ambedkar also to some extent was influenced by socialism. Kan tarvata ideas maaripoyinayi Ambedkar. Okay, Bhagat Singh, you know, he formed an organization called Hindustan Socialist Republican Association. Socialist. He was also influenced by socialism. So many people across the entire world came under the influence of communism and socialism. Okay, Karl Marx, we'll discuss Karl Marx at length a little later. Okay, as of now, just understand that Marxism began to influence in a very, very big way, and Marxism emerged as a major threat to capitalism. Okay, and Karl Marx emerged as its strongest critique. Capitalism is almost accepted as the creed by the Western world, was now being challenged by one man, Karl Marx. Okay, he forever altered the way people started to think about politics. Forever. ఓకే, ఒక్కసారి కార్ల్ మార్క్స్ స్టేజ్ మీదకి వచ్చిన తర్వాత ట్రెడిషనల్ వేలో థింక్ చేయడం స్టాప్ చేశారంట. అందరూ కొత్తగా ఆలోచించడం మొదలుపెట్టారనమాట. కొత్తగా ప్రపంచాన్ని చూడడం మొదలుపెట్టారనమాట. అప్పుడు దాకా పీపుల్ బిలీవ్డ్ డెమోక్రసీ ఈజ్ ఎ గవర్నమెంట్ ఆఫ్ ద పీపుల్, బై ద పీపుల్, ఫర్ ద పీపుల్. ఆఫ్టర్ కార్ల్ మార్క్స్, democracy became government of the people, by the people, for the rich. You know, it's only for the rich, because only the rich will contest the positions. Only rich gets elected. 84% of our parliamentarians are the upper classes. Okay, tells kada meeku, right? We have a very big influence of money, muzzle, and criminalization of politics had taken place in a very big way in India, isn't it? So democracy is not a government of the people, by the people, for the people. It's a government of the people, by the people, for the rich. Marx. This was the imprint that Karl Marx had left forever on political science. Okay? So as Marxism was gaining more and more currency, as Marxism was getting more and more popularity, capitalism was being threatened. Okay? And at the same time, suddenly the First World War breaks out. Okay? Now tell me, why did the First World War break out? I told you, I think I asked you yesterday. 1914. Why did it take place in the first place? What's the reason? What could be the reason? Apart from what everybody says, one very simple thing that I'll say you. Yeah. Yeah, of course. There was what was called as a race for colonies. There were some countries which were ahead in acquisition of colonies. England, France, they were very much ahead. Okay? Russia. There were some countries which were behind in acquisition of colonies. Like Germany, Austria, Turkey. They were behind in acquiring colonies. Kabatti, ఈ రెండు groups of countries, రెండు alliances ఏర్పడి they fought against each other. That was the First World War. Germany, Austria, Turkey, one group. France, England, Russia, France, England, Russia, America, of course, another group. Okay? So itla debbaleskunnaru annamata. First World War. Okay? So First World War also was an outcome of capitalism. Capitalism gave the world inequality, exploitation, world war, my dear friends. Okay? So First World War came to an end, obviously. Right? Slowly, socialism was gaining ground. In the meanwhile, in 1929, the world witnessed the Great Economic Depression. Have you heard this? 1929, 1930, we had witnessed the Great Economic Depression. This was a very paradoxical situation, my dear friends. Normally, capitalism tends to display these what are called as trade cycles. ఇప్పుడు కూడా మనం చూస్తూ ఉంటామండి. ఒక 8-9 years of full growth ఉంటుంది, a period of stagnation ఉంటుంది, అతో విల్ సీ a period of recession. మనకి ఎకనామిక్ రిసెషన్ ఉంటుంది కదా. ప్రజెంట్ రిసెషన్ ఉందా? ప్రజెంట్లీ రిసెషన్ ఉందా ఎకానమీలో? ఉంది, రిసెషన్ ఉంది. ఓకే, కాబట్టి పింక్ స్లిప్స్ అవన్నీ వస్తున్నాయి. ఓకే, మళ్ళీ కొంతకాలంతో మళ్ళీ రివైవ్ అవుతుంది అనమాట. దిస్ ఇస్ వాట్స్ కాల్డ్ ఎస్ ఎ ట్రేడ్ సైకిల్. ఇట్ హ్యాపెన్స్ వన్స్ ఎవ్రీ 10 or 11 years. నోబడీ నోస్ వై. ఓకే, ఇట్ హ్యాపెన్స్ ఇన్ క్యాపిటలిజం, రైట్? అట్లాంటి ఒక ట్రేడ్ సైకిలే ఇట్ బికేమ్ వెరీ డీప్. ఓకే, ద మార్కెట్ వాజ్ ఫ్లడెడ్ విత్ ఆల్ టైప్స్ ఆఫ్ గూడ్స్, బట్ పీపుల్ were not having money to buy. People were not having purchasing power. కాబట్టి ఏమైందంటే డిమాండ్ పడింది. There was no demand. Okay? And because there was no demand, the companies started to stop their supply. That led to layoffs and unemployments. That led to further decline of purchasing power. Okay? The governments had no clue to how to get over this scenario. Okay? The entire Western world was reeling under economic depression at that time, except for one country, which became a socialist country. What was that? The first socialist country, Russia, under a leader called Lenin. Have you heard his name? Lenin spearheaded the first socialist revolution, which created the first socialist state in the form of USSR. Okay? It was this country only which survived the Great Economic Depression. While all the Western countries were reeling under economic depression, Russia was showing progress, my dear friends. They were progressing. Okay? So people started to think whether socialism is better than capitalism. Okay? So the Great Economic Depression, rise of Russia, and massive strides in development shown by Russia under a planned economy, okay, all began to capture people's imagination. And people began to think whether socialism was better than capitalism. Capitalism was facing its darkest hour at that time. Okay? And suddenly, the world witnessed the Second World War. Can you tell me why the Second World War had taken place? సరే ఫస్ట్ వరల్డ్ వార్ అంటే ఏదో రీజన్ చెప్పారు, ఏదో స్పార్క్ చెప్పారు కదా. సెకండ్ వరల్డ్ వార్, వై డిడ్ ఇట్ టేక్ ప్లేస్? హిట్లర్, ఓకే, Nazism and fascism. Fascism broke out in Italy and Nazism broke out in Germany. Who are they? They are all dictators. These are dictatorial regimes. There is only one woman political philosopher that we'll be studying as a part of political science, and her name is Hannah Arendt. Okay, she was the one who presented an anatomy of these dictatorships. అసలు ఏంటి డిక్టేటర్షిప్స్, అసలు ఎందుకు పుడతాయి, ఎలాంటి పరిస్థితుల్లో ఇలాంటి డిక్టేటర్షిప్స్ రైజ్ అవుతాయి అనే దాన్ని షీ అనలైజ్డ్ ఇన్ హర్ ఐడియాలజీ. విల్ లుక్ ఎట్ దట్ లేటర్. ఓకే, సో ఇన్ వెస్టర్న్ యూరప్ వీ సా ద రైజ్ ఆఫ్ డిక్టేటర్షిప్స్. వై వై డు థింక్ దట్ ఇంతకాలం, ఇన్ని వందల సంవత్సరాలు ఎప్పుడూ లేనిది సడన్గా ఇలాంటి మాన్స్టర్స్ గవర్నమెంట్స్ని ప్రజలు ఆదరించారు? వై? హార్ష్ వార్ రిపరేషన్స్ వేశారు కదా. I'll tell you what. The other way of looking at it, as socialism and communism were seriously raising as a challenge to capitalism, the capitalists, they supported dictatorships. They financed the dictatorships. That led to rise of dictatorial ideologies and parties and leaders like the fascist ideology with Benito Mussolini in Italy and the Nazi ideology with Adolf Hitler in Germany. It also led to rise of dictatorship in Japan because the capitalists in Japan were financing these monarchies. And these dictators initially they suppressed the communists. కాబట్టి ఇనీషియల్గా జర్మనీలో కానీ, ఇటలీలో కానీ, జపాన్లో కానీ persecution of communists had taken place. Communists were persecuted, they were murdered, they were jailed, they were exiled. Okay, the entire communist movement was decimated by these dictators. Okay, ఆ తర్వాత the natural enemy of dictatorship is democracy, and therefore the Second World War now assumed the form of dictatorship versus democracy. All the dictatorships came on one side: Germany, Italy and Japan. ఈ మూడు కూడా ఒక కూటమిగా ఏర్పడ్డాయండి. ట్రిపుల్ ఎంటాంట్. దే ఆర్ ఆల్సో కాల్డ్ యాజ్ ద యాక్సిస్ పవర్స్. అండ్ ద డెమోక్రసీస్ కేమ్ ఆన్ ద అదర్ సైడ్. ఓకే, US, Germany, US, France, England, and of course Russia joined later. Okay, America says, we are entering the Second World War to make the world safe for democracy. So Second World War became a war between democracy and dictatorship. Okay, ultimately the dictatorships were defeated, democracy triumphed. Okay, and then the Second World War came to an end. Okay, now what was the next part of the story? With the Second World War coming to an end, you know that Europe, which was till then the theater of global politics, began to slowly decline. Okay, the countries in Europe weakened because they witnessed 2 world wars, and when they looked back at their economies, what they found was war-ravaged and torn economies. Okay, they were completely decimated. because of war battery unleashed by fascists and Nazis in Europe. And then we saw the rise of two new superpowers. One was based in the West, the other one was based in the East. US and USSR. Two superpowers rose across the horizon. Okay? As Europe was declining, these two superpowers, Russia as well as America, they pressurized all the European countries to allow the third world countries to be granted their independence. ఎందుకంటే వీళ్ళు ఆధిపత్యానికి రావాలి అంటే యూరోప్ కంప్లీట్గా డిక్లైన్ అయిపోవాలి కదా. యూరోప్ డిక్లైన్ అయిపోవాలంటే ఏమవ్వాలి? యూరోపియన్ పవర్స్ వాళ్ళకు ఉన్నటువంటి ఓవర్సీస్ కాలనీస్ని గివ్ అప్ చేయాలి. సో బోత్ రష్యా యాజ్ వెల్ as US pressurized the European powers to renounce their empires. Okay? That led to all these former colonies gaining their independence. So between 1944 to 1949 to 1950, around 130 countries won their independence. Andro mandokati. Okay? So India was one amongst those countries which won its independence. Okay? So slowly the world was being decolonized. Decolonization of the world was taking place. Okay? And we saw the rise of two superpowers. One in the West, which had carved its own sphere of influence. Okay? Now please remember that as the Second World War was coming to an end, Soviet Union was occupying Germany from the east and America was occupying Germany from the west. Across a city called Berlin, the American and the Soviet forces were standing face to face, with Adolf Hitler having committed suicide in the bunker. Okay? At that time, a new world order had taken its birth, with two superpowers apparently undefeatable by the other were standing face to face, and both these superpowers knew who was going to be their next adversary at global domination. America knew it was going to be Russians, and Russia knew it was going to be Americans. It was then that a new type of warfare had begun, which was very, very popularly called as, anybody? The Cold War. Have you heard that? ఇవన్నీ మీరు విన్న పదాలే కదా, వినలేదా? కోల్డ్ వార్ విన్నారు కదా, రైట్? దిస్ వాజ్ ద వార్ఫేర్ that was between the two superpowers. So Soviet Union declined, America was capitalist. వెస్టర్న్ నుంచి ఏ కంట్రీస్ని అయితే అమెరికా ఆక్యుపై చేసుకుంటూ అంటే కంట్రోల్ చేసుకుంటూ వచ్చిందో జర్మనీ వరకు, ఇవన్నీ కూడా దే వెంట్ అండర్ ద కంట్రోల్ ఆఫ్ US. ద వెస్ట్ యూరోపియన్ కంట్రీస్ అలాంగ్ విత్ వెస్ట్ జర్మనీ వెంట్ అండర్ ద కంట్రోల్ ఆఫ్ అమెరికా. ద ఈస్ట్ యూరోపియన్ కంట్రీస్ ఇంక్లూడింగ్ హంగరీ, పోలాండ్, ఇవన్నీ కూడా ఓకే, దే వెంట్ అండర్ ద కంట్రోల్ ఆఫ్ సోవియట్ యూనియన్ టిల్ ఈస్ట్ జర్మనీ. సో ఈస్ట్ జర్మనీ నుంచి ఈస్ట్ యూరోపియన్ కంట్రీస్ అన్నీ కూడా దే వెంట్ అండర్ ద కంట్రోల్ ఆఫ్ సోవియట్ యూనియన్. వెస్ట్ జర్మనీ నుంచి వెస్ట్ యూరోపియన్ కంట్రీస్ అన్నీ కూడా దే వెంట్ అండర్ ద కంట్రోల్ ఆఫ్ US. So both these superpowers now were beginning to challenge each other at global domination. They were carving their spheres of influence. They were slowly spreading across the entire world. You know what is the meaning of a superpower? A superpower is a country which cannot be defeated by a combined alliance of all the other major powers in the entire world. That is a superpower. Even if America combines with all the other major powers in the entire world at that time, that alliance could not defeat Soviet Union. If Soviet Union combined with all the major powers at that time, it could not defeat America. That was the power that both these countries had commanded at that time. That was the meaning of a superpower. Okay? So itlanti power toti, itlanti ఆధిపత్యం తోటి both these countries have come to the forefront and both these countries began to challenge each other. Okay? It was at the closing years of the Second World War that a curtain was raised for a new type of warfare called Cold War. As I told you, right? America formed its own military alliance with all the West European countries. The most powerful military alliance ever conceived in human history. Can you tell me what is that called as? We still hear it today. It is this alliance which is the primary reason for the outbreak of the present Russia-Ukraine war. What is that alliance called as? Yes, NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. This was the military alliance conceived by US. It formed its own military alliance. To counter NATO, Soviet Union organized its own military alliance, and that was called the Warsaw Pact. The world was now broken up into two poles of power, one based in the west, the other based in the east. Okay, that was called the bipolar world. Okay, we look at these concepts of unipolarity, bipolarity, multipolarity in international relations in paper 2. Okay, we saw the birth of a new world order characterized by two power centers creating a bipolar world. Okay, the major powers of the world were divided between these two military alliances. Okay, right, and both the superpowers competed with each other. Right, if America exploded the first atomic bomb and used it, Soviet Union exploded the first neutron bomb. Okay, right, both these countries began to compete with each other at every possible avenue and arena. Okay, in missiles, okay, in strengthening alliances, in acquiring arms and nuclear weapons, in acquiring missiles, in space. If Soviet Union launches the first man into space, America lands the first man on the moon. It was a technological warfare. So it was a war of every sort, the Cold War. But they did not fight a direct war with each other. It was not a hot war. It was only a Cold War. A war characterized by mutual threat, suspicion, and a continuous state of unease and indifference and hostility, which did not result in a direct, open conflagration between the two superpowers. It was only a Cold War. ఎందుకు మరి ఒకరితో ఒకరు ఎనిమిటీ ఉన్నప్పుడు కొట్టేసుకోవచ్చు కదా. ఓకే, అలా కొట్టేసుకోలేదు డైరెక్ట్గా. దే వర్ ఓన్లీ ఫైటింగ్ అన్ ఇండైరెక్ట్ వార్. ఎందుకు? బికాస్ బోత్ దీస్ కంట్రీస్ వేర్ nuclear powers. And you know that in a nuclear war, there cannot be a winner and a loser. Kada? Kabatti both these countries avoided a direct confrontation with each other, and both these countries were fighting proxy wars. If America supports Eritrea, Soviet Union supports Ethiopia. If America supports Iraq, Soviet Union supports Iran. If America supports South Korea, Soviet Union supports North Korea. If America supports South Vietnam, Soviet Union supports North Vietnam. If America supports Pakistan, Soviet Union supports India. If America supports the government, Soviet Union supports the rebels. Example, where America supported the government and Soviet Union supported the rebels which toppled the government to establish a communist state. Fidel Castro, Cuba. Have you heard about Fidel Castro? Che Guevara, Fidel Castro. They were revolutionaries in Cuba who were supported by Soviet Union against America-backed government. If America supported the government, Soviet Union supported the rebels. Conversely, if Soviet Union supported the government, America supported the rebels. Example, Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, Soviet Union supported the Najibullah communist government. America supported the rebels, the Taliban, the Mujahideen. ఇవన్నీ కూడా అమెరికా పెంచి పోషించిన పాములేనండి. తర్వాత ఆఫ్ కోర్స్ అమెరికానే కాటేసాయి అనుకోండి, బట్ these were rebels that were supported by US. So this was the kind of warfare that the world had witnessed, and this was called the Cold War. That continued, my dear friends. It continued. In the meanwhile, India became independent. Okay, so India had a choice whether we should go the capitalist way or whether we should go the communist way. Which way? Right? So India, along with a good number of other third world countries, said, okay, we are not going to join any military alliance. We are not going to be aligned with any of these superpowers. We are going to remain Non-aligned. Have you heard this? NAM. Non-alignment movement. This was the India's deliberate foreign policy choice. We had decided to remain non-aligned, non-committed to any power bloc, because we said, see, we are newly independent. We want to protect our independence to take our decisions. If we join the capitalist bloc, we'll have to adopt capitalist mode of production. If we join the communist bloc, we'll have to adopt the communist economy. Okay? We don't want to do that. We want to adopt our own developmental model which is suiting to our requirements. Okay? కాబట్టి ఏం చేసాం మనం 1956 ఇండస్ట్రియల్ పాలసీ రిజల్యూషన్ ద్వారా వీ హ్యావ్ డిసైడెడ్ టు అడాప్ట్ ఏ మిక్స్డ్ ఎకానమీ మోడల్. బోత్ అది ఇది రెండు కలిపేసుకుని ఒక మిక్స్డ్ ఎకానమీ మోడల్ని ఇండియాలో మనం ప్రవేశపెట్టుకున్నాం అనమాట. క్యాపిటలిజం అంటే ప్రైవేట్ ఓనర్షిప్, కమ్యూనిజం అంటే కామన్ ఓనర్షిప్. ఓకే, సో మనం ఏం చేసాం, నో private sector and public sector, both of them will thrive, both of them will together contribute to economic development. India will adopt a mixed economy model. So all these countries which had then recently won their independence began to adopt a new path or a new way called the non-aligned way. Okay, so this was how slowly the world was progressing. Okay, however, by 1980s, by the middle of 1980s, okay, the rivalries were continuing. Soviet Union as well as US. The Cold War was on. There was fierce rivalry, and the world at numerous instances had come to the brink of a nuclear showdown between the two superpowers. There were several instances. For example, even in 1971. You know what happened in 1971, isn't it? Don't tell me you don't know. What happened in 1971? Something very monumental had happened for India. 1971. Depression అంటే of course ఒక రకమైన డిప్రెషన్, ఎందుకంటే that was the year that I was born. అది ఒక రకమైన డిప్రెషన్ అనుకోండి. అది కాకుండా 1971 was a monumental year as far as India is concerned. Come on guys, you know this. 75 అది. 1971 Bangladesh Liberation War. Okay, India had been instrumental in liberating Bangladesh. Okay, of course, the entire world accused us. The entire Western world, including America, accused us. In fact, you know, in 1971, when India was engaged in Bangladesh, okay, America had sailed its 7th fleet, which entered Indian territorial waters in Bay of Bengal. And America served an ultimatum to India: withdraw from Bangladesh or face an imminent naval attack. The world's most powerful naval fleet, the 7th fleet, entered the Bay of Bengal with nuclear-powered submarines threatening India. Who was the Prime Minister? The only man in Indian politics, Mrs. Indira Gandhi. You know, she was the Prime Minister of that time, of India at that time. You know what she did? She entered into a treaty of peace, friendship and cooperation with Soviet Union in 1971, which says that in case any other country attacks India, the response will be given jointly by India and Soviet Union. Now, that was the treaty of peace, friendship and cooperation that was entered into by India and Soviet Union. A treaty patkuni, Indira Gandhi serves an ultimatum to US: get out of Indian territorial waters or face an imminent attack from the Indian Navy. For the first time, India threatens America, my dear friends, you know, in 1971. Okay? The Pakkan Soviet Union petkuni, India threatens America. You know, that was the time when both the superpowers were on almost a nuclear war with each other, because Soviet Union had started sailing its navy to the Bay of Bengal at that time. ఎప్పుడైతే ఇందిరా గాంధీ వార్నింగ్ ఇచ్చిందో, Soviet Union began its sail of its naval fleet to the Bay of Bengal. మరి అమెరికా ఏమనుకుందో ఏమో. ఓకే, it withdrew its 7th fleet from Indian waters. You know, that was the time. కొంచెం లేట్ అయి ఉంటే రష్యన్ నేవల్ ఫ్లీట్ బే ఆఫ్ బెంగాల్కి వచ్చి ఉంటే ప్రాబబ్లీ ఇంకొక రకమైన ఇంటర్నేషనల్ రిలేషన్స్ ఉండేవేమో మనకి ఇప్పుడు. ఓకే, బట్ ఎనీవే, దట్ వాస్ ద సినారియో, మై డియర్ ఫ్రెండ్స్. దట్ వాస్ ద కోల్డ్ వార్. Finally, by the middle of 1980s, Soviet Union was getting weaker and weaker because of inherent or internal weaknesses. And finally, by the end of 1980s, Soviet Union collapsed. Soviet Union broke up into 16 independent countries. Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Georgia, Ukraine, Russia, all these countries. Okay? India lost a very dependable diplomatic ally in the form of Soviet Union. Okay? Now, the Cold War had come to an end. America had remained the sole superpower of the world with sufficient power to dominate the entire world. America emerged as a global hegemon, the most dominating power in the entire world. India now requires to reorient its foreign policy. Okay? Find its foothold. It was at the same time that a new type of ideology was beginning to dominate the world. A new ideology. Can you tell me which is the most dominant ideology in the world currently? Is it capitalism? No. Is it socialism? No, obviously not. Excuse me? New. It's called as, on the other way, it's called as neoliberalism. Okay? Please remember that after the end of Second World War, the idea of welfare state became very popular. The state should take care of welfare of the disadvantaged sections ani adani idani. A welfare state idea chala popular ayindandi Second World War tarvata. Okay? So throughout 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, the concept of welfare state was becoming very popular, and welfare state proposed more functions for the government. It proposed a lot of functions for the government. దీనికి చాలా dissatisfaction వచ్చింది, and by the late 1980s, a new type of ideology called neoliberalism began to assume a lot of significance. Today, the most dominant ideology in the world is neoliberalism. This is the most dominant ideology. Okay? This is the ideology behind the current processes of liberalization, privatization, and globalization. This is the ideology. Today, the whole world is globalized. The whole world today had liberalized their economies. Okay? There are very few countries which have resisted this trend of LPG. Okay? Even India also became a member of the World Trade Organization. India also had liberalized, privatized, and globalized its economy. So till 1991, in 1991 we had adopted a new economic policy. Okay? 1991 varaku kuda India also was having a lot of controls, lot of restrictions in its economy. Okay, we'll discuss that when we discuss section B, paper 1, which speaks about India's developmental experiences. You know, initially when we became independent, we had adopted a developmental model which was called as the Nehru-Mahalanobis model. Have you heard that? Okay. Later on, after Indira Gandhi had come to power, there was another developmental model that we had adopted, which was called as the Indira Swaminathan model. ఇవన్నీ మీకు ఎకానమీలో చెప్తారులేండి, పొలిటికల్ సైన్స్ కూడా వస్తాయి ఇవన్నీ కూడా. Okay, after 1991 we had adopted a new economic policy, NEP, which proposes a new developmental model which was called as, anybody? The name of the finance minister and the name of the prime minister in 1991. It was called Rao Manmohan model. Manmohan Singh was the finance minister. P.V. Narasimha Rao was the prime minister, and Manmohan Singh was the finance minister. And that model of development was called as the Rao Manmohan model, which was adopted in 1991. And since then, we also have jumped onto the boogie. Okay, we have also liberalized, privatized, and globalized our economy. Okay, so Soviet Union collapsed in 1989. Okay, and Warsaw Pact was disbanded. Okay, all the East European countries slipped out of the control of Soviet Union. Okay, NATO remains as the only powerful military alliance. And from 1995 onwards, NATO had begun to expand eastwards. Okay, joining up many of the East European countries which were former allies of Soviet Union. Soviet Union was watching it. Russia. Presently it's Russia, kada? So Russia was watching it. Okay? Because America always believes that not only today, sometime in the future, if there was going to be any country which is going to challenge it militarily, it is going to be Soviet Russia. Okay? Therefore, what is America doing? America is expanding eastwards. ఆ ఈస్ట్ యూరోపియన్ కంట్రీస్ అన్నిటి కూడా మెల్లిగా అమెరికా నాటోలో జాయిన్ చేసేసుకుంది. ఓకే, సో నాటో is becoming more and more powerful, and slowly NATO's expansion is now knocking on the borders of Soviet Union because Ukraine accepted to join the NATO. It means NATO will be now standing along the border of Soviet Union. If Ukraine joins NATO, American missiles will be placed on the Soviet border, which can target every city of Russia. This is Russia's problem. చెప్పాం మీకు రావద్దని, డోంట్ కమ్ టు అవర్ బార్డర్స్, డోంట్ నాక్ ఎట్ అవర్ డోర్స్ చెప్పాం, మీరు వినట్లేదు. కాబట్టి యుక్రెయిన్ని అటాక్ చేసి యుక్రెయిన్నే ఇన్వైట్ చేసేస్తామంటుంది. ఏం చేసుకుంటారు వీళ్ళు? అమెరికా అటాక్ సోవియట్ యూనియన్? ఇట్ కెనాట్ అటాక్ సోవియట్ యూనియన్. ఐ టోల్డ్ యూ, ఇన్ ఏ న్యూక్లియర్ వార్ దెర్ కెనాట్ బి విన్నర్స్. కాబట్టే ఓర్చుకుంటుంది అమెరికా. యూనో, సోవియట్ యూనియన్ యుక్రెయిన్కి వెళ్ళినా, యుక్రెయిన్ ఇన్వైట్ చేసినా, యుక్రెయిన్ని ఆక్రమించుకుంటున్నా, ఓకే, ద వెస్టర్న్ కంట్రీస్ ఆర్ స్లోలీ వెయిటింగ్ అండ్ వాచింగ్ ఫర్ ద వార్ టు ఎండ్. ఏదో విధంగా ఈ వార్ ఎండ్ అయితే చాలన్నట్టు వెయిట్ చేస్తున్నారు. సోవియట్ యూనియన్ ఈజ్ నో మూడ్ టు ఎండ్ ద వార్. ఇట్ ఈజ్ డెఫినెట్లీ గోయింగ్ టు ట్రై టు ఆక్యుపై యుక్రెయిన్. ఓకే, బికాస్ మళ్ళీ వదిలేసామనుకోండి, రేపొద్దున మళ్ళీ నాటోలో చేరొచ్చు కదా, హూ నోస్. కాబట్టి సో దే ఆర్ ఆన్ దేర్ ఆన్ గార్డ్. Okay, so this is very broadly the story of the world. It is these trends, okay, right from the ancient Greek period with Plato, Aristotle, okay, the modern period with Machiavelli, Karl Marx, Thomas Hobbes, Locke, and J.S. Mill we'll be discussing. Okay, it is these trends of the First World War and Second World War that we'll be discussing as a part of international relations. We'll look at how the United Nations organization had taken its birth. What factors propelled the birth of an international organization? Okay, is these things that we'll be studying. This very broadly is the subject matter of political science, which we'll be discussing in the course of next 4.5 to 5 months. Okay, so I just wanted to tell you this story because whatever that you have heard now about socialism, liberalism, economic depression, non-alignment movement, Cold War, ఇవే టాపిక్స్ అండి మనకున్నవి. పొలిటికల్ సైన్స్లో మనకున్న టాపిక్స్ అన్ని లిబరలిజము, సోషలిజం. ఓకే, ఇప్పుడు నేను మీకు ఒక క్వశ్చన్ ఇచ్చాను అనుకోండి, ఆల్రెడీ ఎగ్జామినేషన్లో ఇచ్చిన క్వశ్చన్. ఇప్పుడు మనం చెప్పుకున్న ఈ ఒక్క 1 hour క్లాస్ తోటే యూ కెన్ అటెంప్ట్ టు రైట్ అన్ ఆన్సర్. ఓకే, బికాస్ యూ హ్యావ్ నౌ గాట్ ద ఫ్లో, రైట్? ఏంటి, ఎప్పుడు, ఎక్కడ, ఎట్లా, దేని కాంటెక్స్ట్ ఏంటి, ఓకే, ఇవన్నీ కూడా మీకు ఒక ఐడియా వచ్చేసింది కదా, రైట్? సో దిస్ ఈజ్ వాట్ విల్ బి డిస్కసింగ్, అండ్ టుమారో we'll be starting our first topic in political science, which is ancient Greek political thought. We'll discuss very broad features of the ancient Greek political thought. Okay, what is their idea? Okay, and then of course we'll move over to Plato. Okay, as I told you, political thought is supposedly the most difficult part, which you will see very soon. In a matter of 1 week, you'll realize that it is very easy. Okay, it is not difficult at all. Okay, as it is usually believed outside. Political thought is very easy. Okay, you'll start feeling comfortable, but koddi rojulu till you get to get the pulse of the subject. Okay, ఎందుకంటే మీరందరూ బీటెక్ స్టూడెంట్స్ సార్. మీదేంటి సార్ బ్యాక్గ్రౌండ్? మీది సార్ డిగ్రీ. ఏం డిగ్రీ సార్? బిఎస్సి. ఓకే, మీది మేడం బీటెక్. చూడండి, మీరందరూ యు ఆర్ గుడ్ విత్ నెంబర్స్ అండ్ దాట్ కదా, రైట్? Suddenly we'll be speaking about things which are, slightly different. కాబట్టి కొంచెం డిఫరెంట్గా అనిపిస్తుంది. ఎక్స్పీరియన్స్ విల్ బి స్లైట్లీ డిఫరెంట్, బట్ you'll get used to that very soon. Okay, the subject is very interesting, there is no doubt about that. Okay, it's very varied. Okay, so we'll get started with the ancient Greek political thought, which will occupy the maximum attention of our classes because this is the base. Okay, understanding the ancient Greek political thinkers is the base ఫర్ యువర్ ప్రిపరేషన్ ఫర్ పొలిటికల్ సైన్స్. మీరు థియరీస్ ఆఫ్ స్టేట్, సావర్నిటీ, లిబర్టీ, జస్టిస్ ఆర్ డెమోక్రసీ ఐడియాస్ అన్నీ కూడా ఈ వెస్టర్న్ పొలిటికల్ థాట్ నుంచే మనకి వస్తాయి. మనం ఐడియాలజీస్ చదువుకుంటున్నాం అనుకోండి, లిబరలిజం చదివాం అనుకోండి, లిబరలిజం చదువుకున్నప్పుడు మళ్ళీ మ్యాకివెల్లీ వెల్కమ్, జేఎస్ మిల్ వెల్కమ్, థామస్ హాబ్స్ వెల్కమ్, వీళ్ళందరూ కూడా లిబరల్స్. దే అప్హెల్డ్ లిబరల్ ఐడియాలజీ. ఓకే, సోషలిజం అనే ఐడియాలజీ చదువుకున్నాం అనుకోండి, మనకి కార్ల్ మార్క్స్ వస్తాడు. ఓకే, సో ఈ వెస్టర్న్ పొలిటికల్ థింకర్స్ ఎవరైతే ఉన్నారో దిస్ ఈజ్ ద బేస్. ఓకే, కాబట్టి దే విల్ ఆక్యుపై ఎ లాట్ ఆఫ్ యువర్ టైమ్, రైట్? అండ్ ఐ విల్ బి గివింగ్ యూ డిక్టేటెడ్ నోట్స్ ఆల్సో ఫర్ సమ్ వెరీ వెరీ ఇంపార్టెంట్ కాన్సెప్ట్స్. ఓకే, అండ్ ఫర్ అదర్స్ ఐ విల్ ఎక్స్ప్లెయిన్ దెమ్ ఇన్ ద క్లాస్. మోస్ట్ ఇంపార్టెంట్ కాన్సెప్ట్స్ అని కూడా ఐ విల్ డిక్టేట్ నోట్స్ ఫర్ యూ. ఓకే, యూ టేక్ డౌన్ దీస్ పాయింట్స్. ఓకే, అండ్ books, రేపు when we meet I'll try to give you the list of books. I'll try to చెప్పాను కదా, I am not in favor of having too many books, because in political science it doesn't matter how much you write. What matters is whether your answer carries the essence. That is important. Okay, so ఇప్పుడు మనకి జనరల్ విల్ అనే ఐడియా వచ్చింది అనుకోండి. ఓకే, వాట్ ఎగ్జాక్ట్లీ ఈజ్ ద ఎసెన్స్ ఆఫ్ దిస్ కాన్సెప్ట్ అనేది మీ ఆన్సర్లో కనిపించాలి. ఓకే, దానికి అండర్స్టాండింగ్ ఇస్ ద కీ. డిఫరెంట్ బుక్స్ రీడింగ్ ఇస్ నాట్ ద కీ, అండర్స్టాండింగ్. ఓకే, అండ్ as I told you, you should try to present your answers in the simplest way. ఓకే, మరీ ఎక్కువ ఫ్లవరీ లాంగ్వేజ్ యూజ్ చేయాల్సిన అవసరం లేదు. ఓకే, దిస్ నాట్ ఎ లిటరేచర్ పేపర్ కదా. సో సింపుల్ లాంగ్వేజ్ and ideas presented in a crisp and in a brief manner, okay, will yield maximum marks as far as political science is concerned. It is like science in some sense, because every concept has its essence, and in reproducing that essence that you get your scores. Very simple. Okay, if neenak chepkunna manam, when Plato says that there should be communism of wives, the idea behind is that you should not have family if you want to be a ruler. Why? Because love for your family can overpower your love for your country. Okay, and secondly, he also says that those who want to rule should not have private property. Why? Because those who have power may use it to acquire property, and those who have property may use it to acquire power. Kabatti Plato says that there should not be coincidence between economic power and political power. Those who wield political power should not have economic power, and those who wield economic power should not have any share in political power. Simple concepts, very simple. Kabate producing classes untayi chusara, వాళ్ళకేమో he gives them right to acquire property. Ruling classes untayi chusara, వాళ్ళకి he denies them the right to acquire property. ఓకే, ప్రొడ్యూసింగ్ క్లాసెస్ ఉంటే చూసారా, హీ డినైస్ దెమ్ షేర్ ఇన్ పవర్. ఓకే, అట్లా కొంతమందికి ఎకనామిక్ ప్రివిలేజెస్ ఇస్తాడు, కొంతమందికి పొలిటికల్ పవర్ ఇస్తాడు. వాళ్ళకి ఇది ఉండకూడదు, వీళ్ళకి ఇది ఉండకూడదు. అప్పుడు కరప్షన్ లేకుండా ఉంటుంది అని చెప్పి అంటాడు అనమాట. యూనో, దట్ ఈస్ హిస్ ఐడియా ఆఫ్ కోర్స్. ఓకే, బట్ వి నో దాట్ కదా, టుడే వి సీ దట్ పొలిటీషియన్స్ ఆర్ అక్వైరింగ్ మనీ బై మిస్యూజింగ్ దేర్ పవర్. క్విడ్ ప్రో కో, హ్యావ్ యూ హర్డ్ దట్? ఓకే, and people who have earned a lot of money, to protect their money, they are trying to secure power. They are trying to become MPs and MLAs. Okay, so there is a coincidence of political and economic power which is leading to corruption, isn't it? This is exactly what Plato had said. Aa essence manaki ardhamaindi anukondi, things become easy. Got it? Okay, so this very broadly is the content of political science, and tomorrow we'll start with the very first topic. Any doubts?